The fist stopped 1 inch from a 10-year-old boy's nose. 200 people laughed. The man in the corner did not. He set down the mop. That was all. He set down a mop and took one single step, and somewhere in that room, a 19-year-old lowered his phone 6 inches without knowing why. Nobody knew his name. 8 months he had cleaned those floors, and not one adult in that building had ever asked. They called him the janitor. It was a word, not a name, and it fit him the way a coat fits a man who has decided to disappear inside it. There is a photograph in a shoebox on a closet shelf. Flat brown ground. A sky the wrong color. A young man in the middle of it with eyes 100 years old. The champion tapped her chin twice, said 1 punch, and the janitor looked up. The fist stopped 1 inch from a 10-year-old boy's nose. The whole room sucked in a breath, held it, then broke apart, laughing the way a crowd does when it decides something is funny before it decides whether it's cruel. And the woman, that punch turned. Slow, deliberate. She turned that same grin on the boy's father. A quiet man in stained work clothes, holding a mop. Let's go back 4 hours, because you need to know who that man was before that room decided who he was. Thursday evening. Ironbrook Martial Arts on the industrial end of Denver, where the streetlights come on early, because the buildings are tall and gray, and nobody planted trees. Vaughn Holloway came in through the maintenance door at 4:15, same as he had for 8 months. And the first thing he did was not touch the mop. The first thing he did was fix the sink in the women's locker room. Nobody asked him to. Nobody would ever know. The faucet had been dripping since Tuesday, and it drove him a particular kind of crazy, that sound the way it filled a quiet room and pretended it wasn't there. 41 years old, and on his knees on a tile floor with a crescent wrench humming nothing, because it needed doing, and he was there. 98 cents in parts, 6 minutes of his life. He didn't mention it to anyone. Then he did the mats. Then the mirrors, which nobody thinks about until they're smeared, and then everybody thinks about them at once. Then the trash. Then the boiler in the back that liked to quit when the temperature dropped below 20, which in Denver in February was most nights, and which Vaughn had learned to coax back to life with a specific tap in a specific place, the way you'd wake a bad-tempered old dog. 4 kids stayed late most nights. Vaughn knew all 4 names. There was Marisol, who was 7, and whose mother worked doubles and always came at 8:40, apologizing. There was Dev, who was 12, and had a stutter that disappeared entirely when he was counting reps. There were the Kepner twins, who fought each other constantly and would destroy anyone else who tried. Vaughn knew their names, their birthdays roughly. Which one was afraid of the dark hallway to the parking lot and needed the light left on an extra 5 minutes. Not one adult in that building knew his. They called him the janitor, which is a word, not a name. But it did the job, and it did it the way that word always does, which is by quietly making a person smaller until they fit in your peripheral vision and stay there. Out in the parking lot in the second-to-last row, a 1998 Buick sat with its engine off and its windows fogging from the inside. Adele Merrick had been parking there 3 nights a week since October. 68 years old. Reading glasses pushed up into gray hair, she'd stopped coloring the month her daughter got the diagnosis because there had suddenly been more important things. And then afterward, there had never again been a reason to start. A cardigan she'd owned longer than her grandson had been alive. Hands folded in her lap, the way women of her generation fold their hands, which is to say, like they're holding something in. She could see him through the window. The boy, Tobien. Toby, 10 years old and small for it, sitting cross-legged in the corner of a martial arts gym with a math workbook on his knee, waiting for his father to finish work. Her daughter's son, her daughter's chin, her daughter's terrible habit of chewing the end of a pencil until it splintered. She'd been coming here 4 months, and she had never once gone inside. Which is a thing you can explain to yourself 100 different ways, and Adele had tried all 100. That it would be awkward, that the boy needed routine, that Vaughn had made it clear at the funeral that he wanted space, though, when she went back over that afternoon. In her mind, she couldn't actually locate the moment he'd said so. Only the moment she'd stood in his kitchen holding a casserole dish and looked at him and felt something go cold and flat in her chest. And then she'd set the dish down and left. 4 months of a parking lot. 16 months of birthday cards mailed instead of delivered. The truth, the one she didn't take out and look at, was simpler. She didn't trust the man raising him. She had never been able to say why. Delia had loved him. Delia had been the smartest woman Adele had ever met, smarter than her mother, by a wide and cheerful margin, and Delia had chosen him with her whole chest. That should have settled it. Except there was something behind that man's eyes that Adele had clocked at the wedding, and never unclocked. A stillness, too much of it. The stillness of water that's deeper than it looks. She'd once watched a glass slip off a counter at Christmas dinner, and Vaughn caught it before it fell 6 inches, and he didn't look up, didn't react, didn't say a word. Just set it back and kept talking. And everyone else laughed and said nice reflexes, and Adele had sat there with her fork halfway to her mouth, thinking, nobody's that fast unless something taught them to be. So she parked in the second-to-last row, 3 nights a week, and she watched her grandson through a window, like a woman watching a house she used to live in. Inside in the office, Sloane Vance was looking at a number and hating it. 32 years old. 5'7", 135 pounds of trained muscle, and she wore it like a woman who'd never lost a fight that mattered. National kickboxing champion 2 years running. Black belt in 3 disciplines. Her face on the banner outside on the website, on the flyers stapled to every telephone pole for 2 miles in every direction. When people joined Ironbrook, they joined for her. She knew it. She never let anyone forget it. The number on her screen was new sign-ups month to date. It was 11, last February, been 43. She closed the laptop. Not hard. Sloane Vance did not slam laptops because slamming things is what you do when you've lost control. And she had built an entire personality on the premise that she had never once lost control of anything. She stood, rolled her shoulders, looked at herself in the office window's reflection until the reflection looked back the way it was supposed to. And she went out to do the demo. Because Thursdays, she did the demo. And the demo always worked. 30 people on the mats. A good crowd for a Thursday. Sloane hit the heavy bag, and it jumped on its chain like it had been struck by a car, and the crack of it rolled across that gym, and came back off the mirrors twice as loud, and every single person on those mats flinched at exactly the same moment. That flinch was the whole point. She lived for it. Always had. There was a feeling that came off a room when it flinched for you, and it was the closest thing to safety she'd ever found. Again, she said, and hit it again harder. The chain screamed. A kid in the front row breathed woe like a prayer. You see that, not even winded. That's what 15 years of discipline looks like. Not talent, not luck, discipline. You want to hit like that, you earn it every morning while the rest of the world's asleep. They clapped. They always clapped. Ansel clapped loudest because Ansel was 19, and Ansel would have walked into traffic if she'd pointed at it. That's why you're the champ. Sloane smiled, the smile that had sold 1,000 memberships. That's right, because in this room there are two kinds of people. She pointed at the bag, swept her hand across the crowd. There's the ones who prove it, and there's everybody else. And that, right there, that was the exact second she made the mistake that would follow her the rest of her life. Because over in the far corner, past the mirrors, past the racked equipment, a 10-year-old boy in a hand-me-down t-shirt was quietly throwing punches at the air. Toby wasn't showing off. That's the part that mattered later. I was in the corner, facing the wall. He'd finished the math and put the workbook in his bag, and he had 20 minutes before his dad was done. And he'd seen something on a phone at school that week that looked cool, and he was trying it. Slow, careful, the way a kid punches when he's copying something he half remembers and hoping nobody's watching. Somebody was watching. Hey, Sloane's voice carried. She'd turned tracking movement in the corner the way a cat tracks a bird at a window. Hey kid, what are you doing back there? Toby froze. 30 heads turned at once. He dropped his hands like he'd been caught with something in his pocket. Nothing. Sorry. No, come here. And she was grinning now, and it was not a warm grin. It was the grin of a performer who has just spotted an easy laugh sitting unattended. You were throwing punches. Let me see it. Come on out here. He's fine where he is. It was the first thing anyone in that building had heard the janitor say in weeks. He'd come out of the back with a fresh trash bag. He stood at the edge of the mat, calm and mild, a man asking for nothing. Sloane looked at him the way you'd look at a chair that had spoken. Relax. I'm just having a little fun. Back to the boy. Come on, kid. Show the room what you've got. And Toby, God bless him, wanted so badly to be brave in front of his father that he stepped out onto the mat. All right. Sloane backed up, gave him room, played to the crowd. Show me a punch, a real one, like you mean it. Toby threw a punch. It was a 10-year-old's punch, elbow-flaring feet flat all arm and no hip. The kind of punch that taps you on the shoulder and apologizes. And Sloane Vance, national champion, face of the academy. Two kinds of people in this room put her hands on her knees and laughed at a child. Oh, buddy. She straightened up, wiped an imaginary tear. Oh, no. No. The students laughed with her. Because that's what students do. That's not a punch. That's a wave. You punch like somebody who has never once in his life been in a real fight. She turned, arms spread. Am I wrong? Somebody tell me I'm wrong. You're not wrong, Ansel called, delighted. Toby's ears went red. He looked at the floor. Vaughn set the trash bag down. I didn't say anything. He just took one step forward and put himself a little more between the room and his son. And there was something in the economy of that movement, the total absence of hurry, that a smarter person than Sloane Vance might have noticed. Sloane did not notice. Sloane was on a roll. Whose kid is this anyway? She scanned the mats. Somebody's got to claim him. He's mine. Her eyes landed on him. Traveled. Slow, deliberate, meant to be seen. From the ball cap gone soft at the brim down the faded flannel to the work boots with mop water dried on the toes. She let the silence stretch because she knew how to work a silence. Oh, a beat. You're the dad. That's right. The janitor's the dad. She said it to the room, not to him, and the room laughed. and every single laugh landed on the boy standing in the middle of that mat with nowhere on earth to look. That explains it. She spread her hands, all fake generosity. Listen, no offense, okay? Some people fight. Some people clean up after the people who fight. That's just how it is. There's no shame in it. Nobody's ashamed of anything, Vaughn said. Good. That's good. The grin got wider. But maybe, and I'm just trying to help here, maybe instead of teaching your boy to throw a punch, you teach him something you actually know. She paused. Let it load. Show him how to hold a mop, where the bucket goes. That's a real skill. That'll feed a family. The room exploded. Somebody actually applauded. Ansel was bent double. A woman in the second row had her hand over her mouth. It was the biggest laugh Sloane had gotten all week, and she took a small bow to accept it. Out in the parking lot, Adele Merrick had gotten out of her car. She'd only meant to stretch her back. 68 years old, and 40 minutes in a Buick does things to a spine. She'd gotten out and walked toward the building without deciding, to the way you drift toward a window when there's a light on in it. And the glass was cold under her palm, and the door was propped an inch because the boiler ran hot, and she heard it. She heard the mop line. She heard 200 pounds of laughter come down on her grandson's head. And here's the thing about Adele Merrick, that she would spend the next 9 days trying not to look at. Her first feeling was not rage. Her first feeling was not how dare that woman. Her first feeling before she could stop it, before it even had time to be a thought arriving fully formed and shameful and instant, was he shouldn't be in there. That boy should not be in a place like that with a man like that, not the woman. Him. She caught it half a second later, the way you catch yourself saying something ugly out loud. She actually flinched. Standing alone in a parking lot in February, with her hand on cold glass, 68 years old, flinching at her own head. Because she'd been handed a scene with one obvious villain in it. And some part of her had reached past the villain, past the laughing woman with the belt and the banner, and gone straight for the quiet man holding the trash bag. What is wrong with you? She thought. And she didn't have an answer. She would not have one for 9 more days. Inside Vaughn Holloway was not looking at Sloane Vance. I was looking at his son. He saw the way the boy's shoulders had curled inward. Saw him blinking too fast, jaw set, doing the exact thing Vaughn had taught him. Don't let them see it. Don't give them that. And doing it so well, so bravely, that it broke something in Vaughn's chest clean in half, because Toby was 10. And Toby had already buried his mother. And the one thing, the one single thing Vaughn had left to give that boy was the sense that his father was a safe place to stand, in a world that laughs at you for no reason at all. And this woman was taking a hammer to it in front of 30 strangers, to sell memberships. And then the old thing woke up. I knew it the way you know. Weather is coming from the pressure behind your ears. And here's what people never understood about Vaughn Holloway, what they got wrong every single time. It didn't feel hot. It felt cold. A stillness dropping down through his chest and out into his hands. The world going quiet and slow and very, very clear. Every exit in that building suddenly lit up like someone had traced them in chalk. Every angle. Every distance. 12 years he'd kept that door welded shut. And it moved. Not for this, he told himself. Not over a joke. You bury it. You take the boy home. You let it go. He picked the trash bag back up. Come on, Toby. Get your stuff. He would have done it. He would have walked out of that gym and eaten every ounce of it, because that was the harder thing, and the harder thing was almost always the right one. That was the whole life he'd built. Swallow it. Protect him. Walk. Except she couldn't leave it alone. Wait, hold on. Sloane stepped in front of him, not touching, just planting herself in the path, closing the easy exit. And the smile was still there. But something meaner had moved in behind it, because a man walking away with quiet dignity was somehow worse for her than a man who fought back. It made her the loud one. It made her the smaller person in the room. And some animal part of her felt that, even if she couldn't name it. You know what your problem is. She leaned in a couple of inches. You come in here every night. You watch us train. You watch me train. And I know that look. I've seen it 100 times. It's the look of a guy who thinks he could do it too. If he wanted to. If he weren't so busy. If life hadn't gotten in the way. Her voice dropped, playing to the phones that had started rising around the room. The guy on the couch, yelling at the TV. Am I right? You should let us go. Same flat, mild, tired tone. Nothing had changed in it at all, which was somehow the thing that got under her skin worst of all. That she couldn't get a rise. Couldn't find the crack. And Sloane Vance had never in her life been able to leave a locked door alone. Or what? The grin came back. Big. For the cameras. That's the question, right? You keep saying, let us go, like there's some or what on the end of it. So finish the sentence. What happens if I don't? You gonna do something about it, a tough guy? No, Vaughn said. I'm going to take my son home. See, I don't think you are. She turned to the room, arms wide. The showman. The crowd, hers. I think this is a guy who talks a big game in his own head and does absolutely nothing in real life. And that's fine. Most people are like that. But don't stand in my house and give me the look. She stepped back, gave herself space, and then she did the thing. Tell you what. Her voice pitched up so the whole room and every phone caught it clean. You think there's a fighter in there somewhere under the flannel? Prove it. Right here. One punch. She tapped her own chin. 2 fingers. Twice. The oldest insult in the book. That's all I'll give you. 1 free shot. You land it, you walk out of here a legend, and I apologize to your kid on camera. You miss, she shrugged. You go back to the mop, and we never talk about it again. The room went up like a match. Do it, somebody yelled. Come on, janitor. Ansel was filming. Half the room was filming. The heavy bag still swayed a little on its chain in the corner. And under those fluorescents, Sloane Vance stood with her chin out and her hands down, and that grin on her face 100% certain, bone certain. The way you're only ever certain about things. You have never actually been tested on that this soft, sad, invisible man was about to fold like a lawn chair and give 30 people the best laugh of the month. And Vaughn Holloway stood very, very still. Here's what nobody in that gym could see. Behind his eyes, a door he'd spent 12 years welding shut was rattling on its hinges. And he could see with a clarity that made his stomach turn exactly how it would go. He could see the distance between them, a little over an arm's length, closing to nothing the instant she committed. He could see the way she carried her weight all forward, all offense, hands low, because she had never in her entire career stood across from a single soul who could reach her before she wanted them to. He could see 4 different ways to put her on that floor before her championship reflexes filed a complaint. He could see it, the way you see a word you've known your whole life. It was nothing. It was easy. It was the easiest thing in the world, and that was precisely the horror of it. Let it go, he told himself again, and his hands had gone cold, and it was already too late to fully believe himself. You've got a boy watching. Whatever you do right now, that's who he thinks you are for the rest of his life. So show him the strong thing. Show him you can eat it and walk. Dad. Toby's voice. Small. Right beside him. Vaughn looked down, and the boy wasn't scared for himself anymore. That was the thing that reached in and grabbed Vaughn Holloway by the heart and squeezed. Toby had stopped being embarrassed about his own bad punch. He was looking up at his father, and there was fear in his face, but it was not fear of anything in that room. It was fear for his dad, because Toby had just watched 30 adults laugh at his father. And some part of that 10-year-old had done the arithmetic that no child should ever have to do. They're laughing at him, and he's not going to do anything. And I don't know if that means he's the strongest person here, or the weakest. And I need him to be the strongest. Please, please let him be the strongest. It was all right there. Naked. Waiting. And Vaughn understood something in that half a second that Sloane Vance would need 9 days to understand about herself. There are 2 ways a father fails a son in a moment like this. He can be weak. He can shrink and take the joke, and teach the boy that the world gets to laugh at you, and you say thank you, and clean the mat. Or he can be exactly as strong as this woman is begging him to be. He can step forward and be magnificent. Be terrifying. Put the champion on the floor in front of her worshippers, and teach the boy that the answer to cruelty is to become more dangerous than the cruel person. Teach him that a man's worth is measured in what he can break. Both of those are failures. Vaughn had spent his whole ruined younger life learning it the hard way. There had to be a third thing, and standing in that gym under those lights with 30 phones up, he did not yet know what it was. He only knew he could not walk away, and he could not win the way she was begging him to. So he did the only thing that bought him room to do neither. He looked back up at Sloane Vance, and his voice came out as quiet and level as it had all night. When? The gym stopped. Sloane thought she'd misheard. Everyone did. The laughter didn't fade out. It cut off, all at once, like a plug pulled from a wall, because that single flat word had landed in the room completely wrong. It wasn't the word of a man being brave. It wasn't a challenge shouted back. There was no heat in it, no bluster, nothing to laugh at. It was the word of a man checking his calendar. Not why. Not you're crazy, not sure, buddy. None of the exits people take, just when. Delivered by a tired janitor holding a trash bag, in a tone that suggested he was already a little sorry about whatever the answer was going to require. Sloane's grin flickered. It was gone so fast that later, watching that video for the 40th time in a dark office, she could barely find the frame where it happened. But it happened. Something cold walked up the back of her neck, and she did not know why. And she covered it the way she covered everything, with volume. When, she made herself laugh. Look at this guy. When? He wants to schedule it. She turned to the room, but the room wasn't laughing with her the way it had been 90 seconds ago. The phones were still up. The mood had shifted a degree in a direction nobody could name. Ansel lowered his phone about 2 inches. Coach, you good? I'm fine. Not here, Vaughn said. Not tonight. Not in front of him. He tipped his head toward his son. Once. You want to do this, we do it right. A time. A place. People there to make sure it's fair, so there's no story afterward about how somebody cheated. A beat. You understand me. and that you understand me landed on Sloane Vance like a hand on the shoulder. Because he hadn't said it the way you say it to an opponent. He'd said it the way you say it to someone you're about to be responsible for. Like a man explaining the rules of a thing to a person who does not yet grasp how serious the thing is. Something in her wanted badly to back all the way out. Laugh it off. Wave it away. Let the janitor keep his little wen and go home to whatever small life he had. But 30 people had seen. The phones had seen. And Sloane Vance had built her entire self on being the woman who never blinked. And she could not be the one who blinked at a man with a mop. So she doubled down. Because that was the only direction she'd ever learned to go. You want it official, chin up. We'll make it official. Saturday, 9 days, right here on this mat. Doors open, everybody, welcome. We put it out there. We let the whole city come watch. And we settle it clean. A hard smile. That work for your schedule? Saturday, Vaughn agreed. 9 days. 1 punch. She jabbed a finger at the air between them, trying to plant her flag back on top of the moment. That's still all you get. 1. From me, you get everything I've got. From you, 1 punch. If that's even fair to you, which honestly I don't think it is. 1 punch is more than enough, Vaughn said. And he said it so simply, so completely without threat, that it was worse than any threat could have been. He wasn't bragging. I was telling her something true, and trying to be gentle about it. And she was too proud to the gentleness. And that combination, that exact combination, is the seed of everything that went wrong for Sloane Vance. And everything that in the end would save her. He picked Toby's backpack off the corner bench and held it out. Get your shoes, bud. Dad, shoes. Toby got his shoes. Sloane watched the two of them move toward the door and felt the strangest, most unfamiliar thing crawl through her chest. A thing she would not have a name for until much later. She had won. She'd gotten her yes. She'd gotten her Saturday. She'd gotten a viral moment she could already feel going off like a flare over the whole city. She had won every measurable thing there was to win in that room. And watching that man's straight back go through the door with his kid, she felt like she'd just lost something she didn't know she had. 9 days, she called after him, because she had to have the last word. Don't chicken out on me, OP man. Vaughn didn't turn around, but at the door, Toby did. The boy looked back at Sloane Vance, at the champion, at the banner with her face on it, at the whole laughing gym, and there was no fear in him now, just a strange, quiet, 10-year-old kind of pity. The look a child gets when he understands something the adults in the room haven't figured out yet. He didn't say a word. He just looked at her a beat too long, then turned and followed his father out into the dark. The door swung shut, and Sloane Vance stood on her own mat in her own gym under a banner with her own face on it, surrounded by 30 people who had just watched her win. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she could not think of a single thing to say. Out in the second to last row, Adele Merrick got back in her Buick before they came out. She didn't want to be seen. She couldn't have told you why. She sat with her hands on the wheel and watched her son-in-law load her grandson into a truck that was older than the boy. Watched him crouch down at the passenger door. She couldn't hear what he said. Watched Toby nod. Watched her close gentle. And the thing she'd felt with her hand on that cold glass was still sitting in her chest like a swallowed stone, and she recognized it now for what it was. And it made her feel about 11 years old. She was relieved. Relieved that he'd let it happen. Relieved that he'd stood there and taken it and walked out, because that meant she was right. That meant the man was hollow, and she'd known it at the wedding, and Delia had been wrong about exactly one thing in her whole bright life. And then she thought about her grandson's face, and how it had looked at the door, and Adele Merrick, who had raised a daughter and buried her, who had not cried in public since 1994, sat alone in a cold car in a parking lot, and put her hand over her mouth. What kind of woman, she thought, is relieved by that the truck's heater took its time. It always did. Vaughn drove with both hands on the wheel and the wipers going against a thin, cold rain, and for 4 blocks, neither of them said anything at all. Then Small from the passenger seat, "Dad, why did you say when?" The light ahead turned yellow, and Vaughn Holloway eased the truck to a stop instead of running it the safe choice made so many thousands of times it had stopped looking like a choice at all. "Because you were watching," he said. And 40 miles of city away on a phone in a bedroom somewhere, a shaky video titled "Black Belt Champ Humiliates Cocky Janitor." He actually said yes had just crossed 10,000 views, and not one single person watching it had the faintest idea what that word was going to cost. The video hit 51,000 views at 11:40 that night. Vaughn Holloway did not know that, because Vaughn Holloway was carrying a sleeping 10-year-old up his own front steps, one arm under the knees, one behind the back, getting the door open with 2 fingers and easing it shut with his heel so the hinge wouldn't wake him. He laid the boy on the bed, still in his clothes, pulled off the shoes, pulled up the blanket, and then he stood there in the dark a minute longer than he needed to, watching his son breathe. That's a thing widowed fathers do that nobody talks about. Standing in doorways, counting breaths, making sure. Then he went to the kitchen and did what he did every single night. Rinsed the 1 plate, set the coffee for morning, checked the back door was locked, checked it a second time, the old habit that never left. His phone had buzzed 19 times in the truck. He'd let it. Now he picked it up. 51,000 views, up less than 3 hours. He watched 30 seconds of it with the sound off, then set the phone face down on the counter. In that video, he looked exactly like what they were all calling him. A tired man in flannel holding a trash bag, saying one word to a laughing champion. You couldn't see his eyes in phone footage. You couldn't see the thing behind them. He didn't read the comments, but he could feel the shape of them through the phone the way you feel heat through a wall. He turned it all the way off. You should read some of those, actually. He hadn't heard the front door. He never didn't hear a door. That was how far off his center he already was 9 days out, and it landed in his stomach like a swallowed coin. Corinne Holloway stood in the kitchen doorway with her coat still on, and her own phone in her hand, and a look on her face that was not a good look. "Corey, it's midnight. You said yes to fighting a professional." She held the phone like evidence. "You, my brother, who won't even honk at people, you said yes. How'd you find out?" "How did I?" She laughed. "It came out wrong, high and scared. It's on my feed, Vaughn. A woman I work with sent it to me. My dentist posted it. There's a version with circus music." Her voice climbed. "What did you do?" "Keep your voice down. He's asleep." "Is he okay?" "He's fine." "He is not fine. He was there." She stopped herself, pressed her lips together, started over quieter. I saw what she said, about the mop, in front of him. Her jaw worked. "I want to drive over there and put that woman through a wall." "Well," Vaughn filled a glass of water at the sink. "That's the thing I'm trying not to teach him." Corinne Holloway was 37 years old, and she had known her brother her entire life. except for an 11-year stretch in the middle of it when she hadn't known him at all. When he'd come home from wherever he'd been, quieter every time, older every time, until the day he came home for good and was so still and so gentle and so careful that she'd sat in her car in his driveway and cried because she'd gotten her brother back, and he was somehow a stranger she loved more than the loud kid she'd grown up with. She knew what he used to be. She was one of maybe 3 people alive who did. Vaughan. She set her phone down on the counter, face down, the way you put down a weapon. Look at me. He looked at her. Are you going to hurt her? And that was the question that mattered. The only one. Vaughn set the water glass down without drinking from it, and did not answer it for a long moment. No, he said finally. I'm not going to hurt her. You paused. Corey. You paused. She came a step closer, dropped her voice all the way down. I've heard that pause exactly one other time in my life, and it was the night before you left the second time. And you gave me the same no, same voice. And then you were gone 3 years, and you came back different. Her eyes were wet now, and furious. So I'm asking you as your sister, what happens to you on Saturday when that woman comes at you with everything she's got, and 30 phones are pointed at you, and she catches you one good time? Silence. What happens to the man I got back because I did not fight to get you back, so you could throw him away for a comment section? Down the hall the heater ticked. A car went by outside. Headlights swept the ceiling and were gone. That's the whole problem, Vaughn said. That's the exact thing I've been sitting in the truck about for an hour. And for 1 second, the careful mask slipped, and Corinne saw underneath it something she hadn't seen in 12 years and had prayed she'd never see again. Not fear of that woman, fear of himself. I don't know what happens to me. That's the truth. 12 years I've kept that door shut, and I don't actually know how strong the lock is anymore, because I have never once tested it. Then don't test it. Call it off. I can't. Why not let them laugh? You've eaten worse than laughing. You taught me that. Because he asked me if I was going to win. Corinne stopped. In the truck, on the way home. Vaughn's voice was very level. He's 10 years old, and he already thinks the whole question is win or lose. He thinks those are the only 2 things there are. He shook his head slowly. If I call it off, he learns his dad is the everybody else. And if I take her apart, which I could, and God help me, some part of me wants to, he learns the answer to cruelty is to become worse than the cruel person. Both of those are lies, Corey, and he's got no mother left to unteach them to him. A beat. He's just got me. Corinne didn't say anything for a long time. So what's the third thing? She finally asked. I don't know yet. He picked up the water glass, set it down again, but I've got 9 days to find it. Which was a good line, and a true one. And it would have been a fine place for the 2 of them to leave it, except that at that exact moment from the dark hallway behind Corinne came a small voice that stopped both their hearts. What door? Toby was standing in the hall in his socks. Neither of them knew how long he'd been there. And that was the thing about the careful house Vaughn Holloway had built. He'd built it so quiet that the quiet worked against him now. His son had come down that hallway on 10-year-old feet and stood in the dark and heard God only knew how much. Hey, bud. Vaughn's voice changed completely, went soft. You're supposed to be asleep. You said there's a door you keep shut. Toby stepped into the kitchen light, looked from his father to his aunt and back, and there was a new thing in his face. A fear with teeth in it. Aunt Corey said you came back different. Different from what? Different from when? His chin trembled. What are you guys talking about? What or Dad? Vaughn looked at his sister, and his sister looked back at him. And in that look was 12 years of an agreement they had never once spoken out loud. He doesn't need to know. Let him have a normal father. Let him have that. And standing in his own kitchen at midnight, Vaughn Holloway realized the agreement was over. That it had ended the second Sloan Vance pointed at his boy and laughed. Corey, give us a minute. Vaughn, please. She looked at Toby. She looked at her brother. Then she squeezed the boy's shoulder on her way past and got her coat, and at the front door she stopped and said without turning around, Whatever you decide to tell him, he can take more than you think. A pause. He's yours. And then she was gone into the rain. Vaughn pulled out a kitchen chair. Sit down, buddy. Toby sat. Vaughn didn't. He went down the hall and Toby heard the closet door, and then he heard the sound of something being pulled off a high shelf. And when his father came back, he was carrying a shoebox. The shoebox. The one on the top shelf, behind the winter blankets. The one Toby had seen 1,000 times, and never once been allowed to touch. The one that had old paperwork in it, according to his father, every single time Toby had asked. Vaughn set it on the table between them. Before I show you this, I need you to understand something. Can you do that? Okay. The man in this box is me, but he's a me from before you were born. He put his hand flat on the lid, and I'm going to show him to you, because I think you're old enough, and because I would rather you meet him from me than hear about him from somebody at school. His hand stayed on the lid. But he scared people, Toby. He scared people on purpose, and there's a part of me that's still scared of him. Do you understand what I'm telling you? No, Toby said honestly. That's okay. Something almost like a smile. You will. And he took the lid off. On top was a photograph. Toby leaned over it. A group of men standing in front of something that was not Colorado. Flat brown ground. A low concrete wall. A sky the wrong color, washed out in white at the edges like the film had been left somewhere hot. They wore gear Toby had only seen in movies, and in the middle of them second from the left was a young man Toby almost didn't recognize, because the man had his father's face. But he did not have his father's eyes. His dad's eyes in that photograph were flat and quiet and about 100 years old, and they looked straight into that camera, like the camera owed them money. That's you. That's me. I was 24. You were a soldier. I was a lot of things. Vaughn sat down now, across from his son, rested his forearms on the table. The short version. The one that's true, and that you can hold on to. He breathed out. Before I met your mom, I spent a long time in some very bad places doing a very hard job, and I was good at it. He looked at his hands. I was so good at it that they kept me longer than they should have, and the longer I stayed, the more I found out something about myself that I did not like. What? I found out that when things got bad enough, there was a place I could go, inside my own head, where I stopped being scared. His voice dropped, where everything went calm and slow, and in that place I could do anything that needed doing and not feel it at all, not while it was happening. A pause. The feeling came later. It always came later. Toby was very still. That place kept me alive, Bud. I won't lie and say it didn't. He turned the photograph face down on the table, gently, the way you'd close a book on somebody's face. But it's not a place a good man visits, and by the end I was scared I was starting to like it. So I came home. And then I met your mom. And there it was. The first real smile of that whole terrible night, small, involuntary. It got in under the door of his face before he could stop it. Delia, I know Mom's name, Dad. I know you do. The smile stayed. I just don't get to say it out loud much anymore. 14 years back. A church basement in Aurora on a Tuesday night because a buddy had dragged him to a thing and then not shown up, which is how most of the important things in a life happen. She was running the coffee urn. Badly. He'd fixed the urn because it was leaking and it needed doing, and he was there. And she'd watched him do it, with her arms crossed and her head tilted, and said, "You didn't ask if you could do that." And he'd said, "It was broken." And she'd said, "So's half this room, and nobody's crawling under any of us with a wrench." And Vaughn Holloway, 29 years old, 6 months home with a door in his chest and a hole where his sleep used to be, had laughed out loud in a church basement for the first time in 4 years. He told her everything 8 months later. All of it. More than he'd told the men who'd been there with him. He'd sat on the end of her bed at 2 in the morning and laid it out like a man emptying his pockets before a search, and then he'd waited for her to move away from him. She didn't move away. She took his hand. Both of hers. And she looked at him with those steady brown eyes their son would inherit. And she said the thing that gave him permission to have a life. That man kept you alive, so I could have you. A beat. So we'll thank him, and then we'll put him away, and you and I are going to build a whole life on top of the box where he sleeps. And that's what we did, Vaughn said. We built a life on top of the box. His eyes were wet now, but his voice held. And then you came along, and you were the best thing that was ever built on top of any box in the history of the world. And then when your mom got sick, he stopped. He had to. Toby waited. When your mom got sick, Vaughn went on rougher now at the very end. She made me promise her one thing. She didn't ask me to be happy. She knew that was too much to ask. She didn't ask me to find you a new mom. She grabbed my hand. She was so weak by then she could barely do it. He swallowed. And she said, "Promise me he never meets that man. Promise me our son never once has to be afraid of you." The kitchen clock ticked. And I promised her. That's the promise I've been keeping for 16 months, Bud. He looked at his own hands on the table. That's the whole reason I clean floors for a living instead of a dozen other things I know how to do. Because floors are quiet. Floors are safe. Nobody ever got hurt because I mopped a floor a little too hard. Toby looked at the overturned photograph a long time. Then he looked up, and Vaughn braced himself. For the fear. For the thing he'd spent 16 months dreading the day his son looked at him and saw the man in the box. But Toby didn't look afraid. Toby looked like his heart was breaking. Dad. Yeah. The lady at the gym, when she was laughing at you. A breath. You could have made her stop the whole time. Couldn't you? It wasn't a question. Yeah, Vaughn said quietly. I could have made her stop. But you didn't. No. Because you promised Mom. Because I promised your mom. And Tobin Holloway, 10 years old, did the arithmetic a third time. The same math he'd done in the gym. The math that had been eating him for 4 hours. And this time, it came out completely different. This time, he understood that the strongest person in that whole laughing room had been the one man in it who chose to stand there and take it. That his father was not weak. had never been weak, was in fact so strong that he had spent 16 months holding a door shut with his bare hands so that his son would never have to be afraid in his own house, and that the only thing on this earth that could have made him crack it open, even an inch, even for a second. "You said when?" Toby said slowly. "Because of me." Vaughn didn't answer. He didn't have to. The boy got up out of the kitchen chair, came around the table, and put his arms around his father's neck. And Vaughn Holloway, who had been calm in places that would break most men in half, who had a door welded shut in his chest, and a champion coming for him in 9 days, put his face into his son's hair. And finally, quietly, for the first time in a very long time, let himself not be okay. "I'm not scared of you, Dad." Muffled, fierce. "I want you to know that. I'm not." "I know, Bud. And you don't have to win Saturday. Okay, I don't care about that anymore. I take it back." Vaughn held him tighter. "That," he said, "might be the smartest thing anybody's said to me all year." And 2 miles away, at that same midnight hour, Sloane Vance was sitting alone in her office, with the lights off, watching the same video for the 40th time. And she wasn't laughing at it anymore. She'd stopped being able to laugh at it somewhere around 300,000. Because the numbers had gotten too big, and the comments had turned a corner she had not expected. And now, half of them weren't cheering for her. Did you see his face when he said, "When"? That wasn't fear, that was a warning. She's about to find out. Something about the janitor isn't adding up. Look how still he is. My uncle was in for 20 years. I've seen that exact non-reaction. That man is not what she thinks he is. Sloane scrolled, and her thumb was not quite steady. "You're up late." Ansel in the doorway, gym bag on his shoulder. Last one out like always. "Go home, Ansel." "You good, coach." He came in anyway, because he was 19 and too loyal to read a room. This is huge, by the way. The numbers. My cousin in Phoenix sent it to me, and he doesn't even know I train here. We're gonna get so many sign-ups off this. This is like the best thing that ever. I said go home. He stopped. He had never heard her use that voice on him. Sloane rubbed her face with both hands. And then, because it was midnight and dark, and Ansel was 19 and harmless, and because she had absolutely no one else on this earth to say it to, she said the thing out loud that she would never in 1,000 years have admitted in daylight. "I don't remember the last time I won a real one." Ansel blinked. "What? A fight? A real fight? Flat. Not a demo. Not a seminar. Not smashing the bag so the little kids go whoa." "Coach, I lost the regional in March. You were there. I lost the one before that." She turned the monitor toward him and turned it back pointlessly. "My last actual win was 14 months ago, and I had to look it up to be sure." She laughed. There was nothing in it. "That banner outside says national champion. That was 2 years ago. 2 years is a long time in this sport. There are girls coming up right now who would take me apart, and they know it, and the sponsors know it. And my numbers were dying, Ansel. Before tonight, my numbers were dying. I was watching this whole thing I built leak out slow, like air out of a tire you can't find the hole in." Ansel didn't know what to say. He was 19. Nobody had taught him what to say to this. "So then a janitor's kid throws a bad punch," Sloane said, and I looked around a room at 30 people who had stopped looking at me the way they used to. And I thought there's an easy win. Her voice cracked. She hated it. She kept going anyway. "Somebody I can beat in front of everybody without breaking a sweat. Somebody nobody respects. Somebody who never fights back." She looked at the frozen frame on the monitor. The flannel, the trash bag. I didn't pick him because he was strong, Ansel. I picked him because I thought he was the weakest person in the room. Because I needed one. A long breath. Because I couldn't remember what it felt like to be the strong one. And I thought if I could just make somebody smaller, just for a second, I'd feel like me again. The office was silent. And now 300,000 people are watching it, she said. And half of them are looking at that man's face and telling me I picked wrong. Coach. Ansel set his bag down. You're the best fighter I've ever seen. He's a maintenance guy. Whatever's on his face, he watched YouTube. You're gonna wipe the floor with him, and everybody's gonna remember why you're you. Yeah, Sloane said, and did not believe it. Yeah, you're probably right. But after Ansel left, she sat in the dark another hour, and she did the thing she told her own students never to do the week before a fight. She got scared, not of losing. Losing, she understood. Losing was a scoreboard, and she'd survived it twice this year already. She got scared of something she could not name. A cold, flat feeling that had come off that man across the mat like a draft under a door. And she found herself thinking over and over about the one thing that had genuinely rattled her. The thing she hadn't told Ansel, because saying it out loud would make it real. The kid, not the boy's bad punch, not his red ears. The way he'd looked back at her from the doorway on his way out. That strange, quiet, pitying look. A 10-year-old had looked at her at the champion, at the banner, at the whole gym, and felt sorry for her. And children don't feel sorry for people who are about to win. Children feel sorry for people who don't know what's coming. Sloane turned off the monitor. The office went black, and for the first time since she was a scared kid herself a lifetime ago, before the trophies, before the banner, before she learned that the way to never be hurt again was to always be the one doing the hurting, Sloane Vance sat alone in the dark and could not make the feeling go away. Here is what nobody tells you about waiting for a hard thing. It does not come at you all at once. It comes in ordinary hours. In grocery runs and school pickups and a leaking faucet at a customer's house on a Tuesday. Because life does not stop for a viral video, and the rent does not care that you are a meme. 9 days. Vaughn Holloway lived every single one of them. By 7:15 Friday morning, the video was past 400,000, and there were 2 news vans in the Ironbrook parking lot. And at 8:40, somebody knocked on Vaughn Holloway's front door. He opened it with a coffee in his hand and toothpaste still on the corner of his mouth. And there she was, 68 years old, gray hair pinned back, a good wool coat buttoned to the throat, because she was a woman who buttoned coats to the throat, purse held in front of her with both hands like a shield or a sandbag. Adele Merrick, his wife's mother, standing on his porch for the first time in 16 months. Adele. Vaughan. And the coffee went cold in his hand because he understood in the first half-second that she had not come to make peace. You can tell. You can always tell. It's in the shoulders. Is he here? He's at school. Adele what? Good. She stepped past him into the house. Didn't wait to be asked. Walked into the living room and stopped in the middle of the rug and looked around at it the way a building inspector looks at a foundation. And Vaughn saw the house through her eyes for one awful second. The mismatched furniture, the stack of unopened mail, the single school photograph on the wall, and the empty nail beside it where a wedding picture used to hang before he'd taken it down because he couldn't get through breakfast with it up. It's clean, she said, surprised. And then hearing herself embarrassed, I only mean, I know what you meant. I've seen the video, Adele said. So has everybody. 40 times. She set her purse down on the arm of the couch. I want you to know that. I want you to know I didn't come here off one look at a screen. Okay. I want you to know I watched it. 40 times. Sitting at my kitchen table with my reading glasses on like an old fool at 2 o'clock in the morning. Her voice was steady. It had a tremble underneath it, way down like a wire. And Vaughn, my daughter, married you because she believed you'd changed. He didn't move. She sat in my kitchen, in the chair by the window, and she told me you'd been through things and you'd come out the other side, and she wasn't afraid of you. A breath. And I said, all right, Delia, because she was the smartest person I ever retzed, and I have never once been able to win an argument with her. Her chin came up. But I want to be honest with you because I'm 68, and I've run out of patience for the other thing. I never believed it. The clock in the kitchen ticked. Not once, Adele said. Not at the wedding, not at Christmas, not when Toby was born, and you cried in that waiting room, and I thought, well, all right. Maybe. Not ever. Because I would look at you, and there was something behind your face that I could not get to the bottom of. And I raised a daughter alone in this world for 18 years, Vaughn Holloway, and the one skill you develop doing that is knowing when a room has something in it you can't see. And now the whole country has watched you agree to a fight in front of my grandson. You've seen 30 seconds of a phone video, Vaughn said. I've seen a man let a woman humiliate his son. That landed. It landed the way only a true thing can land, coming in at exactly the angle where the armor doesn't meet. And then, she said, I've seen him agree to fix it with his fists. Adele, I'm not going to fight her. You said when. I did. The whole world heard you say it. I said it to buy 9 days. For what? And there it was. The question he did not have an answer to. Not yet. To find another way through it, he said. Adele Merrick looked at him for a long moment, and Vaughn saw something in that look that hurt worse than anger would have. Because it wasn't anger. It was pity. The exact pity you feel for a man you've decided cannot do the thing he's promising. That's not an answer, she said. That's a hope. She picked up her purse. I'd like to see him. On weekends. Regular. I'd like to pick him up from school on Tuesdays and Thursdays and give him a hot meal at a table with a cloth on it. Adele. That's not a request I'm making exactly. She was already at the door, and she stopped with her hand on it. And she said the thing she'd been carrying up the walk, and her voice broke on it, which she hated, which she would think about for 9 days. I have buried a husband and a daughter, Vaughn. I have exactly one person left in this world, with my blood in him. A beat. And on Saturday, half of Denver is going to watch you walk into a room to find out what you are. She opened the door. I would like to know before they do. And then she was gone down the walk, and Vaughn Holloway stood in his own living room with cold coffee in his hand. And the terrible part, the part that sat down in his chest and stayed there for 9 days, was that she was not wrong. He went to work anyway. That surprised people later. He clocked in at 4:15, and there was a young man with a microphone in the lot who called out, Mr. Holloway, sir. Just one question. And Vaughn walked past him and in through the maintenance door and did the mats. Dunmore, the owner, came in at 5. Vaughn had met him exactly twice in 8 months. Dunmore had never once learned his name. Dunmore knew it now. Vaughn. Buddy. All teeth. Listen, our sign-up page crashed this morning. Crashed. We're getting calls from 3 states. That's good for you. It's good for us. A hand on Vaughn's shoulder that Vaughn did not move away from, though every cell in his body catalogued the weight of it, the angle, the 4 ways it came off. I'm just saying, a man with your story, you shouldn't be pushing a mop. That's a waste. It's not a waste. Come on, let me put you on staff. Instructor. We'd have to redo the banner, but no thank you. And Vaughn Holloway went back to the mirrors and left the owner of the building standing in the middle of his own gym, with his mouth slightly open. At 6:40, Toby was not in the corner. Vaughn came out of the back with the trash bag, and the corner was empty. The bench, the math workbook, gone. And for 4 seconds, 4 full seconds, which is a very long time when your chest has stopped, Vaughn Holloway stood in the middle of a martial arts gym and could not find his son. Then his phone buzzed. A photograph. Toby at a kitchen table Vaughn recognized. A plate of pot roast. A tablecloth with little blue flowers on it. And underneath from a number he hadn't dialed in 16 months, he ate 2 helpings. I'll have him home by 8:30. Vaughn stood there holding the trash bag, and the thing that went through him was not gratitude, and it was not anger. It was something worse and more complicated than either. It was the feeling of a man being helped by someone who does not think he's fit. She was good at it. That was the part that got under his skin. Adele Merrick was good at it. She sent photographs all weekend. Unprompted. Toby at a table with a cloth on it. Toby up to his elbows in a mixing bowl. Toby asleep on a couch under a crocheted afghan with a magazine open on his chest. And every single one of them was a small, quiet, unanswerable argument. Look what I can give him. Look at the tablecloth. Look at the second helping. Look at what he has when he's away from you. Vaughn typed thank you 7 times over the weekend. Sent it 6. The 7th he deleted because what he'd actually typed was he already had a mother, and his thumb had hovered over that for 11 seconds before he came back to himself, which frightened him more than the news vans did. Toby got shoved into a locker bank on Monday at 11:40 in the morning. Not hard. Nothing broke. That's what he told himself walking to 4th period with his shoulder aching and his ears full of noise. There were 3 of them, and the biggest one was named Cody Rash, and Cody Rash had a phone out, and Cody Rash said, "Say when." And the other 2 lost their minds laughing. "Come on! Say it like your dad. When—" A hand on Toby's chest, pushing him back into the metal. "My dad says your dad's gonna get his teeth knocked out on Saturday, and it's gonna be on TV. Move. Oh, move." Cody leaned in. "You know what my mom said. She said your dad mops floors because he's too dumb to do anything else. She said that at dinner." And here is what Tobin Holloway did. Nothing. He stood there with his back against a locker and his hands open at his sides, and he did absolutely nothing. Because his father had told him 16 months ago in a car outside a funeral home, "Don't let them see it. Don't give them that." So he didn't. He waited them out. He picked up his backpack when they got bored. He went to 4th period, and he did not tell anybody. Not a teacher, not his aunt, and especially not his dad. 2 miles away, Sloan Vance was falling apart in the most disciplined way a person can fall apart. Because she was still training. God was she training. 5 in the morning, 9 at night, Ansel holding pads until his forearms went numb. And she was sharp, sharper than she'd been in a year, and it wasn't helping. Because every night at 11, she went into the dark office and pulled up the video and dragged the little scrubber to the same place. 9 seconds. She'd found it on Sunday. 9 seconds into the clip, right after the mop line, right when the room went up. Vaughn Holloway sets the trash bag down. That's all. That's the whole thing. He sets a bag down on a mat and takes one step. And Sloan Vance, who had spent 15 years learning to read a body across a distance, watched that one step 40, 50, 70 times and could not stop watching it. Because he doesn't shift his weight to do it. Nobody steps like that. You step, your center goes with you. Your shoulders tell on you. A quarter second early. Everybody does it. She did it. World champions did it. He just arrives 1 foot further forward. Like the floor moved and he didn't. "What are you?" she said to a monitor at midnight out loud, alone. Ansel found her there Tuesday night. "Coach, it's 11:30. Watch this." "I've seen it." "Watch it." She scrubbed back, played it. "Right there. Tell me what he did." Ansel squinted, 19 years old and utterly earnest. "He stood up. Yeah." Sloan sat back in the chair. "That's what I thought too, the first 30 times. She said nothing for a moment. "Ansel, if you had to guess, where's a guy learned to move like that?" "I don't know. Nowhere." He laughed. Stopped laughing. "Coach, you're not? You're not actually scared of him?" And Sloan Vance opened her mouth to say no, and found that she couldn't. Wednesday is the day it almost ended before it started. 3:15 in the afternoon at Larkspur Elementary, one of those Denver February days where the sun is out and it's 28 degrees and the whole world is bright and merciless. Vaughn was standing at the fence with his hands in his coat pockets. Toby was 30 feet away by the bike rack. And a man Vaughn didn't know came over. Late 40s, puffer vest, truck keys on a carabiner. The kind of guy who talks with his chin. "Hey, you're him." "Excuse me, you're the guy from the video." He turned and called across the sidewalk. "Hey, Denise, it's the guy. I'm just here for my son." "No, hey, listen, this is great." Grinning. Phone already coming up out of the vest pocket. "My kid told me your kid goes here. I didn't believe him. Can I get a picture for real? Say when for me." "No." "Come on, one picture." I said no. And the man laughed and turned toward the bike rack and raised his voice. And this is the part. This is the exact part. "Hey, kid. Hey, you're the janitor's kid, right? Tell your dad to smile." Toby froze by the bike rack with his backpack half on one shoulder, and 40 feet of playground concrete turned into a corridor, and the world went quiet. That's what it does. That's how you know. Not loud. Quiet. The sound peeled off the top of everything. The way skin comes off a peach, and the light changed, went flat, and even no glare anywhere, and Vaughn Holloway could suddenly see every single thing in that schoolyard at once, with an evenness that was not natural, and had never once been natural. The man's keys. Left hand, which meant his right was free and low. The carabiner. A weapon, if it came to it, and it would not come to it, and the fact that he had already priced it out was the thing that should have terrified him, and did not. The distance. 9 feet, 2 steps for a normal man, 1 for him. The angle of the man's front foot turned out, meaning the knee was loaded wrong, meaning he'd go down and stay down without any real effort at all, and it would take less than a second. And it was so easy. And down in that cold, flat place. A voice that sounded like his own younger self said almost kindly, "There you are. I missed you." Vaughn's hand was on the man's collar. He did not remember crossing the 9 feet. That's the part. That's the part he would think about at 3 in the morning for the rest of his life. Not the grip, the gap. the complete absence of the moment where he decided. The man's face had changed, all the grin gone out of it in a single frame. Because whatever he was looking at now up close was not a janitor. "Dad," Toby's voice, high and cracked and coming from somewhere on his left, and Vaughn Holloway came up out of it the way a diver comes up too fast, with the pressure still in his ears, and the sound of the world came back all at once. A car alarm, a school bell, somebody's radio, and he looked down and saw his own hand fisted in a stranger's collar. He let go. He stepped back, both hands open at his sides. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. "I'm sorry." That was "I'm sorry." The man in the puffer vest backed up 3 steps, straightening his collar. Face gone red and blood. "You're crazy," he said, and it came out shaking. "You're actually crazy, you know that." And then he was walking fast toward the parking lot and calling for Denise and looking back twice. Vaughn stood in the middle of a schoolyard and turned around, and Adele Merrick was standing 15 paces away with her car keys in her hand. She had come to pick Toby up. It was Wednesday, and it wasn't her day, and she had come anyway because she had made a lasagna, and it was too big for one person, and that was the reason she had given herself in the car on the way over. She had seen all of it, every second. She did not say a word. She just looked at him with her purse in the crook of her arm, and her mouth slightly open, and there was no triumph in her face. That was the terrible part. If there had been triumph, he could have gotten angry. There wasn't. There was only a woman looking at the thing she had been afraid of for 11 years, and finding out she had been right, and taking absolutely no pleasure in it whatsoever. He didn't tell Corinne about the schoolyard. That was the first thing he'd kept from his sister in 12 years, and he noticed himself doing it, and he did it anyway. That night, Vaughn Holloway sat on the floor of his own bathroom, with the door locked and the light off, because his hands were shaking, and he did not want his son to see his hands shaking. You cross 9 feet, and you don't remember it. You don't remember it. 12 years of coffee, and locked doors, and mopping, and every single night, checking that back door twice, and you crossed 9 feet of playground concrete over a man with a phone over a photograph, and if the boy hadn't yelled... He stopped that thought. He physically stopped it the way you'd put your hand out to stop a door. Because he already knew the answer, and the answer was that he did not know the answer. What happens Saturday? What happens Saturday when it's not a man with a phone? When it's a trained fighter coming at you full speed in front of 200 people, and she catches you one good time, and there's blood in it, and the boy is right there, watching Vaughn Holloway put his forehead on his knees on a cold bathroom floor. And for the first time since the funeral, he said it out loud to nobody. "Delia, I don't think I can do this." She came at 8 the next morning. He'd known she would. She sat down at his kitchen table without being asked, and she set her purse on the chair beside her, and she took out a manila folder, and she put it on the table between them. And Vaughn Holloway looked at it and did not touch it. "What's that?" "It's a letter from a family attorney named Bernice Okafor. I've had 2 consultations with her. The second one was Tuesday." She folded her hands, and underneath the letter is a petition for temporary guardianship. It's filled out. It's signed. A beat. It has not been filed. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere down the block, a garbage truck was working its way up the street, and it was so ordinary, so completely ordinary. And Vaughn Holloway had spent 11 years of his life in places where the whole world could end, and there'd be a bird singing through it. And he had never gotten used to that either. "You wouldn't win," he said quietly. "She told me that. He's got a father. I'm not sick. I'm not using. I've never been arrested. I've never once. She told me all of that, Vaughn. She told me I'd almost certainly lose. Adele's voice did not rise. Not once that whole morning. She also told me what happens if I make a phone call to the county after what I saw yesterday afternoon. And there it was. Not the folder. The folder was theater, and they both knew it. The phone call. A single phone call from a grieving grandmother, describing accurately in detail a man with combat training putting his hands on a stranger in an elementary school yard 9 feet from his own son. That wasn't a lawsuit. That was a caseworker on his porch inside 72 hours. I haven't made it, she said. I know. I don't want to make it. I know. She waited for him to fight her. She had prepared for it in the car. She'd rehearsed the whole thing, and every version she'd rehearsed had him standing up or raising his voice, or saying, "How dare you?" or crying, and she had an answer ready for every one of them. She had not prepared for what he actually did. Vaughn Holloway pulled out a chair and sat down across from her and put his head in his hands, and said, "You're right." "What? You're right, Adele." I wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the wood grain of a kitchen table he and Delia had bought second-hand 11 years ago because she liked the scratches on it. I crossed 9 feet of concrete yesterday, and I don't remember doing it. Silence. I'm not saying that for sympathy. I'm telling you a fact, because you're the only person in my life I can't lie to right now, and I've apparently decided that's you, which is a hell of a thing. He looked up, and Adele Merrick saw his face, and something in her chest turned over. Because he wasn't defending himself. He was agreeing with her. "I'm not sure about me either," he said. She had no idea what to do with that. 68 years old, and she had come armed, and she had spent $200 on a lawyer, and she had a signed petition on his kitchen table, and the man had simply set down his weapons in front of her, and now she was standing over him with hers, and it felt obscene. "Then don't fight her," Adele said. "Saturday. Just don't." "I've thought about that." "So don't. And on Monday, my son goes back to the same school where 3 boys shoved him into a locker bank this week." He stopped. Adele's face changed. He what? And Vaughn Holloway sat very still, because he had just heard himself say a thing he had not known he knew. "He didn't tell me," he said slowly. "He's got a bruise on his shoulder blade. I saw it Tuesday night when he was getting in the shower, and he said he ran into a door." "And you didn't?" "I didn't ask, because if I ask, he has to lie to my face, and he's 10, and he's protecting me." His jaw moved. "He's been protecting me since the funeral, Adele. Do you know that he does the dishes? He never asks for anything. He tells me he's fine. He is a 10-year-old boy who has decided his job is to make sure I'm okay." Adele Merrick put her hand over her mouth. Because she had seen that before. 1988. A girl in a yellow raincoat, 8 years old, standing at the kitchen counter, making her own school lunch with the radio on low because her mother had cried in the bathroom that morning and had not known the door didn't latch. Delia had never asked for a single thing that whole year. Not one thing. And Adele had been so grateful. So relieved. She'd told her sister on the phone, "She's such a good girl, she's handling it so well." And her sister had said, And Adele had not understood what that meant for another 25 years. "Take the folder," Vaughn said. She blinked. "What? Take it. I'm not going to fight you on it. If you want to make the call, make the call. I'll open the door, and I'll answer every question they ask, and I won't say one word against you." He stood up. "But I'm asking you to wait until Saturday. That's 2 days. Because I made his mother a promise, and I have got one shot at keeping it, and it's Saturday, and I don't get another one." "What promise?" And Vaughn told her, standing in his kitchen, with his hands flat on the back of a chair. He told her what her daughter said in that hospital bed on the second to last day, when she was so weak she could barely close her hand around his. "Promise me he never meets that man. Promise me our son never once has to be afraid of you." And Adele Merrick sat in his kitchen and listened to a man repeat her daughter's last words to her. And she had not known. Nobody had told her. She had been in the cafeteria, getting coffee she didn't want, because she couldn't be in that room every minute, because a mother can only watch so much, and she had missed it. And she had been carrying 16 months of... What did she say at the end? What did my daughter say at the end? And here it was, delivered in a kitchen, by the man she'd come to take a child away from. She left the folder on the table. She actually forgot it. That's how she'd tell it later, and it was the truth. She got to her car and sat down and reached for her purse and realized her hands were empty of everything except keys. And she did not go back in for it. Friday night, the night before, Toby Holloway lay in bed until 11:40, listening to his father not sleep. And then he got up. I went down the hall on 10-year-old feet, past the closed door where his dad was lying awake, on top of the covers, with his boots off and his eyes open, and he went to the hall closet, and he pulled the desk chair from his own room, and he climbed up, and he took the shoebox down all by himself. He sat on the closet floor in the dark, with the door pulled almost shut, and a flashlight he'd gotten for Christmas. And he looked at the photograph, the flat brown ground, the concrete wall, the sky the wrong color, and his father's face at 20, with somebody else's eyes in it. Toby looked at it for a long time. Okay, he thought. Okay. Think. Because he had heard his aunt in the kitchen, and he had heard his grandmother's voice on the porch through a bedroom wall, and he had seen a man's collar in his father's fist in a schoolyard on Wednesday afternoon. And he had seen what happened right after. He'd seen his dad's face when he let go. And Toby had understood something on that playground that no adult in this entire story had understood yet, because adults were all busy arguing about whether his father was dangerous. He came back. Everybody's scared he'll go. Nobody's noticing he came back. And he came back when I yelled. Not when the guy yelled. Not when the bell rang. When I yelled. Toby put the lid on the box and put it back on the shelf exactly where it went, squared up against the winter blankets, because he was his father's son. And then he sat on the edge of his bed in the dark and made a decision. 10 years old. Secret. Enormous. Completely his. Tomorrow I'm going to be in the front row. Not in the truck. Not with Aunt Corey in the back. Not 2 miles away in a house with a tablecloth. Front row. Where he can see me. Because if I'm the thing that brings him back, then he has to be able to find me. So he has to be able to see me the whole time. That's my job. That's my whole job. He lay down. He did not sleep for a long while. And down the hall, his father lay awake too, in the dark, on top of the covers, thinking about a woman in a hospital bed, and a folder left behind on a kitchen table, and a promise with about 18 hours left on it. Neither of them knew the other was awake, which is the most ordinary thing in the world, and also, on that particular night, the saddest. 2 miles away, Sloane Vance sat in her car, in her own parking lot at 1 in the morning and did not go inside. Because Vic Brandell had put up a fight poster. She hadn't approved it. She hadn't even known. She'd pulled in at midnight and the headlights swung across the front of her own building, and there it was, 6 feet tall, taped inside the glass. Her face on one side. A blown-up blurry phone video still of Vaughn Holloway holding a trash bag on the other. And across the bottom, in letters a foot high, 1 punch. Sloane sat with her hands on the wheel and looked at it. And she thought about a boy in a doorway looking back at her with pity. And she thought about a man setting a trash bag down without shifting his weight. And she thought with a clarity that arrived out of nowhere and would not leave, I have made a terrible mistake, and there is no longer any way for me to unmake it. Because that was the thing about that Thursday night, 9 days ago. Sloane Vance had gone looking for the weakest person in the room. And in about 18 hours, she was finally going to find out exactly who she'd found. By 6 o'clock Saturday, there were people on the grass. The lot had filled by 5:30, and the overflow had gone down the block, and somebody had set up a folding table by the fence, selling bootleg t-shirts, black cotton, $20, and on the front, in white letters, they said, 1 punch. Vaughn Holloway walked past a kid wearing one on his way in. He didn't say a word. He came in at 6:40, through the back, through the maintenance door he'd used for 8 months into the boiler hallway he'd fixed a dozen times, the one part of that building that was his. And he stopped there in the dark, with his hand flat on the wall, and breathed. Toby was next to him. Corinne had wanted to keep the boy home. Adele had called at noon and asked in a voice with no fight left in it whether Toby could spend the evening at her house. And Vaughn had said no, to both of them, because his son had asked him first. And because his son had asked him the way you ask for something you have already decided about. You sure about this? Vaughn crouched down in that hallway. You can wait in the truck. Aunt Corey's right out front. There's no shame in it. This is going to get loud. You said I could be up front. I did. Then I'm up front. The boy's jaw was set exactly like his father's. I'm going to be right where you can see me. The whole time. A beat. Okay. Look for me. When it gets bad, you look for me. And Vaughn Holloway took his son's face in both hands. You're the smartest person I know. You always say that. Because it keeps being true. He stood up. He rolled his shoulders once. All right, let's go say hello to the nice lady. The noise hit them like weather. Boos and cheers all mixed together. Folding chairs, scraping phones going up in a wave, and a PA system nobody had asked for, and Vic Brandl's voice coming through it too loud and too close to the mic. Folks, the man of the hour, the one, the only. Vaughn didn't hear the rest, because he was scanning the room the way he couldn't stop himself from scanning any room. Cataloging exits, counting bodies, reading the 2 men by the wall who were standing wrong, and hating that he was doing it, and unable to stop. 211 people, 4 exits, front-back boiler hallway fire door behind the racked equipment that opens outward and sticks. Stop it. Stop counting. You're counting because it's what you do when you're scared and you don't want to feel it. So stop counting and go find your son. Corinne got Toby into the front row, second chair from the aisle. She had her hands on his shoulders, and her face was the color of paper. And 3 rows behind them at the end, sitting very straight in a good wool coat with her purse in her lap, was Adele Merrick. She had not planned to come. She had told herself all day that she was not coming. She had made a casserole she did not want, and put it in a refrigerator she did not open, and at 5:15 she had gotten in the Buick to go to the pharmacy, and she had driven straight past the pharmacy. And now she was in row 3 of a martial arts gym with 200 strangers holding her purse the way you hold a railing. Vic Brandell had the microphone. Okay, everybody. Now we had a whole conversation about rules, which was a lie. There had been no conversation. Vic had written the rules that afternoon on the back of a receipt, because the insurance company had called Dunmore at 2 o'clock and asked one very specific question, and Vic had immediately started calling it an exhibition and printing waivers. He'd made Vaughn sign one at the door. Vaughn had read it, all of it, which had visibly annoyed Vic. Here's the deal, Sloane has agreed out of the goodness of her heart. Somebody booed. Somebody else laughed. To give our challenger the exact terms he demanded. 1 punch for the janitor. She comes at him with everything. He gets 1 shot to land. He paused for the crowd. He'd been waiting all week to pause for the crowd. He lands it clean, she apologizes on camera, and he walks out a hero. He doesn't bigger pause. Well, then we all saw what we came to see. The room roared, and in the middle of it, the two of them looked at each other. Sloane Vance in full gear, gloves on, hair back, bouncing on her toes the way fighters do, loose and warm and ready. Vaughn Holloway in a plain gray t-shirt and track pants and old wrestling shoes. No gloves, no wraps, carrying nothing. And for one strange beat in all that noise, the two of them were the only quiet things in the room. Last chance, Sloane said, low, off mic, just to him. And there was something almost human in her face when she said it. You can still walk. I'll take the heat. I'll tell them I called it. You keep offering me the exit, Vaughn said, because I don't understand why you won't take it. I know. He rolled his shoulders. That's the whole problem with you. And it's not your fault, and I'm not going to fix it in the next 10 seconds. Sloane's face hardened. Whatever door she had it closed, and she stepped back to her mark and put her hands up and became the champion again. Because the champion was the only person she knew how to be when she was frightened. Fighters ready. Vaughn found Toby in the front row. The boy was standing on his chair so his father could see him over the crowd, and Corinne had a fistful of his jacket, and Toby gave his dad one small nod. I'm here. Vaughn nodded back. Fight. She came off her mark like a bullet. And she was fast. Faster than the video had made her look. Faster than the crowd expected. 2 years of losing be damned because whatever had slipped away from Sloane Vance, it had never been her hands. She opened with a combination that would have finished most men alive. Jab, cross, low kick, hook, clean, sharp, championship level. And every single strike hit air, because he wasn't there. He hadn't blocked, he hadn't countered, he hadn't raised his hands. He had moved a half step, a shoulder roll, a slide of the hips, and Sloane's beautiful combination sailed past him by inches, past his ear, past his ribs, past nothing at all. And suddenly she was a full step beyond where he'd been standing off balance for a quarter second, throwing punches at the ghost of a man. The crowd's roar stumbled. Ansel lowered his phone about 6 inches. He didn't notice he'd done it. She reset instantly. Too good to fall for her own frustration this early. She came again. Faster. Then the real shot, a right hand aimed at the button on his jaw with everything behind it, the punch she'd ended 3 professional fights with. Vaughn tilted his head 1 inch. It went by. What? A woman in the 4th row said out loud to nobody. What was? Sloane threw again. Missed. Again. Missed. And now the noise in that room was changing. Curdling. because 200 people had come to watch a champion take apart a janitor. And instead they were watching a janitor make a champion look like she was punching underwater. And he wasn't hitting back. He wasn't doing anything. He was just not there. Then she threw the head kick. It was a beautiful thing. It was honestly the best technique anyone in that room would see in their lives. Right leg hip turned over foot, coming around at head height, with enough on it to put a grown man on a stretcher. And Vaughn Holloway caught it. Not blocked. Caught. One hand under the ankle, one on the calf, absorbing it so completely that there was almost no sound. And a man in the second row came halfway out of his chair with both hands up, because now it was coming. Now he had her leg, and she was on one foot, and every person there had seen enough fights to know what happens next. You sweep. You dump her on the back of her head. That's what happens next. He set her foot down on the mat, gently, the way you'd set down a glass. And then he let go and stepped back and put his hands at his sides again. And 211 people went silent at once, because it was somehow worse than being knocked down. It was so much worse. He had taken care of her, in the middle of her, trying to hurt him. He had held the most dangerous part of her body in his 2 hands, and he had put it back where she needed it, and then he had let go. And he had not looked pleased about it. And he had not looked at the crowd. He'd looked at her feet to make sure they were under her, like a man steadying a ladder. And in row 3, Adele Merrick's hand came up to her collar. Oh, she thought, just that. One syllable in an old woman's head in the middle of 200 silent people. Oh. 25 seconds in. Sloane stopped. Stepped back, breathing harder than she should have been. Stand still. It came out before she could stop it. You want me to make it easy for you, Vaughn said. I'm not going to do that. You're running. I'm not running. That's not fighting. And she was angry now, and the crowd could hear it, and that made her angrier. You said you'd fight me. I never said that. His hands were still down at his sides. He had not raised them once. You said 1 punch. I'm waiting for the right one. And in the front row, standing on a chair, Tobin Holloway felt his heart start to pound. Not with fear, with something else, something dawning, because he was watching his father do the exact thing his father had described in a kitchen at midnight 8 days ago. He wasn't fighting. He was controlling. I was running the whole thing without throwing a single punch, like a man walking a big dog on a very short leash. And the dog didn't know yet that it was on a leash. He's not trying to win, Toby breathed. What? Corinne said. He's not trying to win, Aunt Corey. Look, he could have hit her right there. And there. He's not. His eyes were huge. He's just showing everybody she can't touch him. Toby, he's making a point without hurting her. The boy's voice cracked. That's the third thing. That's the thing he was looking for. And Corinne Holloway looked at the floor, and then at her nephew, and realized the 10-year-old had understood the fight before she had. But out on that mat, Sloane Vance had arrived at the exact place Vaughn had been, quietly, deliberately, mercifully, trying to keep her away from. She had been made to look like a fool in her own house, in front of her own students. On a live stream, 45,000 people were watching, and every missed punch was a fresh humiliation stacked on the last one. And humiliation for Sloane Vance had only ever had one antidote her entire life. The same one she'd reached for 9 days ago with a 10-year-old. The same one she reached for now. She stopped boxing. She threw 15 years of technique out the window, and she came at Vaughn Holloway, not like a champion, but like something cornered, headlong, wild arms wide, everything she had. And when he slipped it, she did the one thing a fighter of her caliber should never do. She grabbed him. She got both arms around him and drove her weight in and clinched chest to chest, because if she could just hold him, he'd have to stop being a ghost. He'd have to be a man in her arms. He'd have to be real. And in the scramble, the lace end on her right glove, a stiff little tail of tape and cord that every fighter in that room had 100 of in a bag somewhere, raked up across his eyebrow. It wasn't a strike. It wasn't even close to a strike. In the whole accounting of that night, it was nothing. A scrape. But eyebrows split the way eyebrows do, and a line of red opened up over Vaughn Holloway's eye, and a single drop ran down and touched the corner of it, and he felt the warm wet of it on his own face. And the room changed. Nobody who was there ever agreed on exactly what they saw. Some said it was the stance. Some said it was his hands, which came up for the first time all night, slow, and settled into a position that was nothing like boxing, and nothing like anything that Jim had ever taught. But everybody agreed on the eyes. Everybody agreed that the tired, mild, patient man who had been dancing away from a champion for 40 seconds was suddenly between one breath and the next, not there anymore. And that something else was looking out of Vaughn Holloway's face. Something flat and calm, and terribly, terribly still. The door was open. He felt it go the way you feel a car start to slide on ice. That sick, weightless instant where your own hands stop being fully your own. The blood. The noise. The woman throwing everything she had at his son's dignity. 45,000 strangers howling for someone to bleed. It hit the lock all at once, and 12 years of welding gave way, and the cold, flat place opened underneath him like a trap door, and he dropped into it, and God help him. It felt like coming home. The world went slow, and quiet, and bright. He could see everything. He could see her next punch before she threw it. He could see the whole architecture of her every opening, every place. She was soft, the way her right hand dropped 4 inches when she reset, which it had done every single time for 40 seconds, and which he had catalogued without meaning to. And his body was already moving to answer it with an economy and a viciousness that had nothing whatsoever to do with the man who mopped these floors. And there was a voice down in that cold place. His own voice. Younger. There you are. This is what you're for. His hand shot out. He caught her wrist mid-strike. He didn't grab it. That's not the right word for what those people saw. He took it. The way you take a doorknob. Casual. Total. And Sloan Vance, national champion, 2 years running fastest hands that Jim had ever produced, found that her arm simply would not move. She pulled. It didn't come. She twisted hard, the escape she'd drilled 10,000 times. It didn't come. And she was suddenly, completely, horrifyingly helpless, held in place by a maintenance worker's single hand. And for the first time in her adult life, Sloan Vance looked into another person's eyes and understood that she was not the most dangerous thing in the room, that she never had been, and that the man in front of her could do anything he wanted to her in the next 2 seconds, and there was not one single thing she could do about it. The gym went dead silent. 211 people. The foam finger. The one-punch shirts. Vic Brandell, with his mouth open and his microphone forgotten at his hip. all of it silent, because every animal in that building had felt the same thing at the same moment. The thing children and dogs feel first. The thing that runs underneath all of our civilization and never quite goes away. The recognition of a genuine predator. Sloane didn't breathe. His grip was iron. His eyes were empty. His free hand had come back and loaded. And everyone in the front 3 rows saw where it was going and understood in one collective sick lurch that they had gotten exactly what they came for, and that it was going to be so much worse than they wanted. Adele Merrick was on her feet in row 3. She did not remember standing. Her purse had fallen off her lap, and neither she nor anyone around her noticed it hit the floor. And the thought that went through that woman's head was not, "I knew it." 11 years she'd waited to think I knew it. What she thought instead, with her whole chest with a violence that shocked her, "Oh, no, come back, son." And in that frozen half-second, in the deepest part of the cold, flat place where the younger man was welcoming him home, where nothing existed but the target and the geometry and the terrible ease of it, a voice cut through. Dad. One word. High and cracked and ringing out across a dead, silent gym from a 10-year-old boy standing on a folding chair. Dad, look at me. I'm right here. And Vaughn Holloway stopped. The loaded hand hung in the air. Down in the cold place, the younger voice snarled at him to finish it, and that place had held him for years, and it did not want to let go. And for one endless instant, the whole thing hung. The man in the box and the man in the room, both of them wearing the same face, fighting over a single hand that hovered an inch from a helpless woman. Look for me. When it gets bad, look for me. He looked. He turned his head, and through the roaring silence and the red haze and the 12 years of welded door blown wide open, he found his son's face in the front row. Toby standing on the chair. Toby crying, terrified, not running, not hiding, keeping the promise he'd made himself in the dark on a closet floor. Being right there, up front, where his father could see him, being the reason. And the boy wasn't looking at a monster. That was the thing that pulled Vaughn all the way back. Toby wasn't looking at him with the horror every other person in that gym was wearing. He was looking at his father with a desperate, drowning, total love. The look of a kid who had already lost his mother and was watching in real time to find out whether he was about to lose his father too. I'm right here. I'm right here. Come back. And Vaughn Holloway came back. He felt it happen. Felt himself climb up out of that cold, flat place, hand over hand. Felt the trap door swing shut. Felt the room return to normal speed and normal temperature and normal sound. Felt his own heart start hammering with a delayed terror at how close it had been. How close. How close. And he opened his hand. But he didn't drop her wrist. He set it down. The same way he'd set her foot on the mat. The exact same way. Carefully, with both the taking and the letting go done in complete control, and then he stepped back and put his hands at his sides. Sloane stumbled back a step, cradling her arms, staring at him. And she wasn't a champion anymore. And he wasn't a predator anymore. And for one long moment, the two of them just stood there, in the middle of 200 people. Both of them breathing hard. Both of them shaking a little. Both of them having just seen all the way down to the bottom of what the other one really was. Vaughn wiped the blood out of his eye with the back of his wrist. It smeared across his temple. He didn't notice. He was still looking at his son. I'm here, bud. It carried. In that silence, it carried to every corner of the room. "I'm okay. I'm here." Toby got down off the chair, and he ran. Right out onto the fighting floor, or past the cameras, past Vic Brandel, past every rule of an event nobody was enforcing anymore. And he slammed into his father's chest and wrapped both arms around him and held on. And Vaughn Holloway dropped to one knee on that mat and held his boy in front of everybody and put his bloody face down into his son's hair. And the gym, the whole howling, sign-waving, blood-hungry gym, did not make a sound, because they had come to see a fight. They'd come to see a janitor humiliated, or a champion embarrassed. They'd come to pick a side and scream for a winner. And instead they had watched a man arrive at the absolute edge of the worst thing he could possibly do. Everyone saw it. Everyone felt it. There was no pretending it hadn't been right there in that room with them. And then they had watched a 10-year-old's voice pull him back from it. They had watched the strongest man any of them had ever seen choose in front of all of them at the exact moment he had every reason and every right and every ability not to stop. And then something happened that Vic Brandel's cameras caught by pure accident. A woman came down out of row 3, 68 years old. Gray hair, good wool coat, purse left behind on the floor under her chair forgotten. She walked out onto that mat past 200 people who had no idea who she was, and Adele Merrick got down on the floor beside her son-in-law, which took her a while. Because 68 is 68, and there was nothing to hold on to, and a man in the second row half stood up to help her, and then thought better of it. And she put one hand flat on Vaughn Holloway's back, and left it there. He didn't look up. He couldn't. "You came," he said, into his son's hair. Barely a voice at all. "I came. I know what you almost did." Her hand didn't move. "I watched you not do it." And a few feet away, Sloane Vance stood alone in the middle of her own gym, holding her own wrist, looking at a father and a son, and an old woman on the floor of a fighting mat. And something in her chest that had been frozen solid for a very long time cracked straight down the middle. Because she had wanted to feel like the strong one again. She had gone looking for the weakest person in the room to prove it on, and she had just watched from closer than anyone else alive the single strongest act she had ever witnessed in her life. And it wasn't the grip that could have broken her arm. It was the open hand that didn't. The gym emptied slower than it had filled. That was the strangest part. That was the part people talked about afterward. Because a crowd that comes to see blood and doesn't get any usually leaves fast. Let down, already on to the next thing, this crowd didn't do that. They filed out quiet. Some of them didn't file out at all. They stood along the walls a long time after it was over, watching a father hold his son on a mat, like they couldn't quite figure out how to walk away from a thing they didn't have a name for yet. Vic Brandel figured it out fast enough. Vic was already by the door pacing, talking too loud into a phone. No, listen to me. It's better than a knockout. Trust me. The kid part, especially the look at me part, that's the clip, that's the whole... And then he shouldered out into the parking lot, chasing a signal, and the door swung shut behind him. And just like that, the loudest man in the building was gone, which left the floor very quiet. Vaughn got to his feet, one hand still on his son's shoulder. Corinne had come out onto the mat by then, and she was doing the thing sisters do, running her hands over his face, tilting his head toward the light, saying that needs stitches, that needs at least a butterfly. Look at me is your vision. And Vaughn let her, because it gave her something to do with her hands, because he could see she was shaking worse than he was. I'm fine, Corey. You are not fine. I saw your face. I saw... She dropped her voice so only he could hear it. I saw the door open, Vaughn, all the way. I know. And I saw him close it. He looked down at his son, who had not let go of a fistful of his shirt this entire time. Yeah, he said quietly. So did I. And that would have been the moment to leave. Get the boy. Get the truck. Get home, ice the eye, be done with all of it. Vaughn had already turned toward the back hallway, toward his own door, the maintenance door, the exit that belonged to him. Wait. The word came from the middle of the floor, and it was small, and it did not sound like a champion at all. Vaughn stopped. Sloane Vance was standing where he'd let her go. She hadn't moved. She'd pulled her gloves off with her teeth, one and then the other, and dropped them on the mat. And she was holding her own wrist. Not because it was hurt, because she needed something to hold on to. And her face, the face from the banner, from the flyers, from every telephone pole for 2 miles, was completely undone. I need to say something, and I need to say it right now before I lose my nerve. Because if I don't say it now, I'm never going to say it. I know myself. The people along the walls went still. A few phones came back up. Sloane saw them, and remarkably she didn't seem to care, and that not caring was the first genuinely new thing Sloane Vance had done in years. You had my arm, she said. Everybody here saw it. You had my arm, and your other hand was loaded. Her voice was unsteady. She pushed it out anyway. And I need to be honest about this in front of all of them, because they were all here. There was nothing I could do. Nothing. In my entire life, I have never once been in a spot where there was nothing I could do. A breath. And you put me there in about 1 second. Her voice caught. She fought it. And then you let go. Sloane. No. Let me. Please. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. Angry at her own tears, he'd been angry at his own shaking. I have been telling myself a story my whole life. The story is that being strong means nobody can ever touch you. Nobody can ever hurt you. Nobody can ever laugh at you. Nobody can ever make you feel small, because you get to them first. You'll be the scariest one in the room, and then you're safe. She laughed, wet and broken. I built a whole gym on it. I put my face on a banner over it, 20 feet tall. And 9 days ago I looked around this room, and I picked out the one person I thought I could make smallest, so I could feel biggest. A pause. And it was a kid practicing punches in a corner. She turned, and she found Toby still pressed against his father, watching her with those wide, unreadable 10-year-old eyes. Hey, she said, and her voice fell apart completely. Hey, buddy, I need to say this to you most of all, okay? I need you to hear it from me, and not from a video. What I said to you 9 days ago, about your punch, about your dad, about the mop. That was the meanest thing I have ever said to another human being. And I said it to a child, in front of a room, to make people laugh. She was crying openly now. And you didn't do one single thing to deserve it. Not one. You were a boy in a corner waiting for his father. And I picked you because I thought you couldn't fight back. That is the worst thing I know about myself. And I did it in front of everybody, so I'm going to own it in front of everybody. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry." The gym was silent. Toby looked up at his dad, and some question passed between them that didn't need words, and Vaughn gave the smallest nod. "Your call, bud. Whatever you want to do here is right." And Tobin Holloway, 10 years old, stepped away from his father and walked out across the empty fighting floor toward the woman who had humiliated him in front of 30 people, and stopped in front of her, and looked up at her for a long moment. "My mom died last year," he said. Sloane's breath went out of her like she'd been hit. I know that doesn't have anything to do with..." His chin trembled. He kept talking anyway. "My dad's the only one I've got left. And when you were laughing at him, I got scared. Because I thought maybe he really was weak. And if he was weak, then I didn't have anybody." And then he said when. And I got even more scared, but for a different reason. And I didn't understand any of it until he showed me the box. He wiped his nose on his sleeve. "You made my dad almost turn into somebody he promised my mom he would never be. Right here. Everybody saw. That's what you almost did." Sloane couldn't speak. She just nodded, taking every word, because she had earned every word. "But," Toby said, "he didn't. He came back, and he came back because of me." The boy squared his small shoulders. "So I'm not going to be mean to you back. Because my dad says you don't get stronger by making somebody else weaker. And if I'm mean to you now, then I'm just doing the same thing you did." And then what was the whole point? He stuck out his hand, the way he'd seen grown-ups do. "So I forgive you. Okay, but you have to actually be different now, not just say it. A beat. My mom used to say sorry is only the first half, and the second half is way harder." Sloane Vance looked down at a 10-year-old's outstretched hand and the national kickboxing champion, 2 years running the fastest hands that Jim had ever produced. The woman who had never lost a fight that mattered sank down onto her knees on her own mat so she could be level with a boy who'd been afraid of losing his only remaining parent. And she took his small hand in both of hers, and she broke completely. "Deal," she managed. "Second half's on me, I swear it." "Deal," Toby said. Somebody along the wall was crying. More than one somebody. And 3 feet away, Adele Merrick stood with her purse recovered and clutched against her chest, and watched a 10-year-old do, in 90 seconds, the exact thing she herself had failed to do for 16 months. Forgive somebody out loud. And Adele thought standing there on a rubber mat in a martial arts gym at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night, I am 68 years old. And that child just showed me how. They got out through the back, all of them, because the news vans had multiplied in the parking lot, and Corinne had gone out first to look and come back saying nope boiler hallway right now. So they went out to the maintenance door, the one only Vaughn knew about. The 5 of them squeezed down a dark hallway past a boiler he'd fixed a dozen times. Vaughn, Toby, Corinne, Adele, and a national champion in bare feet carrying her shoes. And Sloane Vance stopped at the fire door and looked at that hallway and said to nobody, "I didn't know this was here." "You own the building," Corinne said. "I lease the building." "You've never been in this hallway." "No." And Vaughn Holloway said mildly, holding the door, "I'm in it every night." Nobody had an answer for that. Not one of them. They walked out into the cold. Corinne drove Adele's Buick because Adele's hands were not right, and she said so, which was the most honest thing she'd done in years. Vaughn drove the truck, and the heater took its time. the way it always did. For 4 blocks, nobody said anything. Then Toby said quietly, looking straight out the windshield, "Dad." "Yeah, bud." "When your eyes went empty back there, when the door opened." A pause. "Were you scared?" Vaughn drove a while before he answered. He eased the truck to a stop at a yellow light, same as always. "Yeah," he said. "More scared than I've been in a very long time." "Of her?" "No, bud." He looked over. "Of me. I'm always a little scared of me. That's kind of the point." The light went green. He pulled through. Gentle. Unhurried. "You want the truth. A man who isn't a little bit afraid of himself is a dangerous thing. The fear isn't the weakness, Toby. The fear is the guardrail. You remember that. Anybody ever tells you they're not afraid of anything, you keep an eye on that person." Toby nodded slowly, filing it away in whatever place 10-year-olds keep the things that will matter to them for the next 50 years. "I wasn't scared," he said. "No. I mean I was. But when I yelled, I wasn't scared you'd hurt me. I knew you wouldn't hurt me." He turned in his seat. "I was scared you'd hurt you." Vaughn's hands went still on the wheel. "I was scared you'd do something, and then you'd have to be the guy in the box for the rest of your life. And you'd be sad about it forever. And it wouldn't even be the lady's fault, it would just feel like it was yours, even though she started it. And I didn't want you to have to carry that." He looked back out the windshield. "So I yelled. A beat. I wasn't saving her dad. I was saving you." The truck was very quiet, and Vaughn Holloway had to pull over. He put it in park on the shoulder under a streetlight and sat there with both hands on the wheel for a second. And then he turned and pulled his son across the bench seat into a hug so hard and so sudden that Toby's backpack went into the footwell. "What?" Toby said, half laughing, muffled against his shoulder. "What did I do?" "Nothing." His voice wasn't working right. "You didn't do anything. You did everything. You saved me, bud. You've been saving me every day for 16 months, and I don't think I ever said it out loud. So I'm saying it now. You're the reason there's still a me to save." Toby didn't fully understand it. He was 10. He'd understand it at 30, and again at 50, and again the first time he held a child of his own and felt the actual weight of what a father carries. But he understood enough. He understood that his dad needed to hold him right then more than his dad needed to keep driving. So he stayed, and he didn't say anything at all. And after a while, Vaughn put the truck back in drive and pulled off the shoulder, and neither one of them knew yet what the next week was going to bring. 6 days later, on a Wednesday morning, Adele Merrick came into the kitchen instead of standing on the porch. She sat down at the second-hand table with the scratches on it, and she put her purse on the floor instead of on the chair. And Vaughn poured her coffee without asking. She looked at the manila folder. It was still where she'd left it. 6 days on a kitchen table, untouched exactly where she'd set it down. "You didn't move it." "It wasn't mine to move." She picked it up, and she tore it in half. It took her 2 tries because a manila folder with 12 pages in it does not tear the way it does in the movies. The first attempt just bent. So she folded the whole thing over and tore it the second time, and then she set both halves down and did not look at them again. Then she reached into her purse and took out an envelope. Old. Soft at the corners from being carried. She set it on the table between them and left her hand flat on top of it for a moment. "I have had this for 16 months. "What is it?" "It's a letter your wife wrote to her mother." Vaughn didn't touch it. She wrote it about 8 days before the end. She gave it to me in that room while you were down getting the car brought around." Adele's voice was very level, which is what a voice does when it's holding something too heavy for it. "And she made me promise not to read it until I needed to. Which, I want to be honest with you, I interpreted as someday. And so I read it on the drive home from the funeral, in a parking garage, because I couldn't wait." She slid it across. "I've read it every few weeks since, and I want you to know that I have understood it wrong for 16 months. He opened it. His wife's handwriting. Slanted hard to the right, the way it always was, the way it had been on grocery lists and permission slips, and the note she'd left on his windshield the day he proposed. "Mom, you're going to think he isn't enough for Toby. I know you. You've thought it since the wedding, and you think I don't know, and I do, and I've let it go because you never said it out loud, and that was your way of loving me. So here it is out loud from me, so you can't argue with me about it later, which is the whole advantage of writing things down. Don't watch what he does. Watch what he doesn't do. You'll be waiting for him to break something. He won't. He'll spend the rest of his life not breaking things, and you'll mistake it for weakness because it's quiet. And quiet is the only thing you've never trusted. Mom, that man has held a door shut every day since I met him. Go stand next to him and help him hold it. You'll like him. You always would have. You were just scared. I love you. Tell Toby I said to eat something green, D." Vaughn Holloway put the letter down on the table and did not say anything for a while. Neither did she. 16 months, Adele said finally. "I read those words 16 months ago, and I thought they were a daughter defending her husband. That's what I thought it was. A wife being loyal." Her hands were shaking. She let them. "And then I sat in row 3 on Saturday night, and I watched you take that woman's leg out of the air and set it down on the floor so she wouldn't fall." She stopped. She had to. And I understood the whole letter in about 1 second. Watch what he doesn't do. That's not a defense, Vaughn. That's instructions. My daughter left me instructions, and I have been carrying them around in my purse for 16 months, like a grocery list. And Adele Merrick, who had not cried in front of another human being since 1994, put her face in her hands at a scratched kitchen table. Vaughn let her. I didn't reach across. He didn't say it's all right because it wasn't all right, and she'd have hated him for saying so. He got up and refilled her coffee and set it back down in front of her and sat down again, which was, of course, exactly the right thing. And Adele noticed that it was. "I want to be here," she said when she could. "Not the folder, not any of that. I want to make him a hot meal on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I want to be in the front row of things." "Okay. That's it, okay." "Adele, you put your hand on my back in front of 200 people. He looked at his coffee. "You could have asked me for anything after that." The offers came that same week. Dunmore called first. Instructor position. Real salary. His face on the banner, we'd have to redo the banner, obviously, but no thank you. "Vaughn, I'm offering you. You didn't know my name 8 days ago." He said it without heat. The way he said everything. "I'll keep cleaning your gym if you'll have me. I'm good at it. It's honest. It lets me pick my boy up from school. That's the job I want. That's the whole job." Vic Brandel called 4 times. Each offer bigger and more insulting than the last. A book, a podcast, a seminar tour. 12 cities we'd need you to say when on stage people love it. It's a whole thing. On the 4th call, Vaughn told him kindly that if he called again, Vaughn would come find him and explain in person why he shouldn't. Vic Brandel did not call again. Corinne thought her brother had lost his mind. That was real money. I know what it was. You could stop worrying about the transmission. You could stop worrying about December. The second I put my face on that banner, I'm the fight guy, Vaughn said. And Toby is the fight guy's kid, for the rest of his childhood. He rinsed his mug. I spent 16 months making sure that's not who we are. I'm not trading it away the first Monday somebody offers me a raise. That's not strength, Corey. That's just a different way of losing the thing I was protecting. And 3 weeks later, Sloane Vance almost blew the whole thing. A morning show flew her out. Big set big lights, a host with very white teeth who called her champ and leaned in and said, "So walk me through it. What was going through your head when you challenged him?" And Sloane Vance opened her mouth, and the old thing came out. Because it was so easy. Because there was a live audience, and they were warm, and they were hers, and she could feel the room, the way she'd always been able to feel a room, and the joke was right there fully formed, the one that had worked 100 times. Honestly, I looked at the guy, and I thought this is the easiest paycheck of my... The audience laughed. And Sloane heard it, and kept going for 4 more words, and then heard herself. Nobody in that studio noticed anything. That's the part. Nobody stopped her. Nobody frowned. The host laughed and moved on to the next question, and the segment ran 4 minutes, and everybody thought it was fine. Ansel texted her 1 word from Denver. Coach. That was it. Just that. No punctuation. Sloane Vance sat in a rental car in an airport parking structure for 40 minutes. Nobody made her. There was no camera. There was no 10-year-old. There was no man with a mop. Just a 32-year-old woman in a rental car with the engine off thinking about the second half. Sorry is only the first half. Then she took out her phone and propped it on the dashboard and recorded 90 seconds of herself with no makeup touch-up and no lighting, and the airport shuttle going by behind her. Hey, so I said something on a show this morning that was funny and cheap and exactly the thing I promised a kid in Denver I'd stop doing. Nobody caught it. That's not the point. I caught it. This is what it actually looks like, by the way. It's not one big moment where you change. It's this. Over and over. Probably forever. Anyway, I'm sorry. Doing better. She posted it, and she did not check the numbers on it. Not once. 6 months later. Ironbrook Martial Arts was a different place. Not overnight. Change like that never happens overnight, and anybody who tells you otherwise is selling something. But bit by bit. Sloane took the banner down herself, the 20-foot one with her own face on it, and she didn't put anything up in its place for a long time. And then, one day, she hung a small wooden sign she'd made in her own garage. No face on it. No trophy. Just letters she'd burned in by hand, a little crooked at the end, because she'd run out of room. The strongest thing you'll learn here is when not to. She stopped the demos where she smashed the bag to hear people gasp. She caught herself sometimes mid-sentence about to humiliate a beginner for a sloppy punch, the way she used to. She'd feel the old reflex come up the easy laugh, the cheap way to feel big, and she'd stop and breathe and get down on the kid's level and fix the punch instead. It was hard. It was so much harder than being cruel. Nobody's quitting anymore, Ansel said one evening. Did you know that they used to quit because you scared them? Now they stay. Yeah, Sloane said, watching a nervous 40-year-old finally get her stance right and light up about it. Turns out you can't build somebody up and tear them down at the same time. She almost smiled. Who knew? Somebody kind of did, Ansel said. A janitor. And Vaughn Holloway kept mopping the floors. That was the part the internet never got over. There were think pieces. There were people who were almost angry about it. But he understood they couldn't. He understood that the entire point of everything he had done in that room was to show his son that a man's worth is not the size of his platform, that you can be the strongest person anyone has ever seen and choose to be small and quiet and useful, and therefore available at 3 o'clock, and that choosing that when the whole world is screaming at you to cash in is its own kind of door held shut with your bare hands. 3 afternoons a week, when the floors were done, he'd sit on the bench in the corner, the same corner where a boy threw a bad punch and started all of it, and he'd watch his son learn to fight from the woman who had once laughed at him. And every so often, Sloane would look over, and Vaughn would give a small shake of his head. Wrong. Watch his balance. Or a small nod. Good. That's it. Let him feel that. And Sloane would adjust, and the lesson would go on. The belt test was in the fall. The gym was full again, but not the way it had been full that Saturday. No news vans. No Vic Brandel. No live stream. No one-punch shirts, just families, parents and grandparents, and little brothers and sisters. Folding chairs, orange slices, a sheet cake on a folding table that somebody's mom had brought. The ordinary, wholly unviral fullness of a room full of people who love the kids being tested. Vaughn sat in the front row. He'd cleaned the gym that morning. Same as always. Then he'd gone home and changed into a clean shirt because he didn't own anything fancy and had no interest in starting. And he'd come back and sat where his son could see him. The same way his son had once stood on a chair where his father could see him. That was a thing they did now. They found each other in rooms. It had started as a lifeline and become a language. Corinne on one side, with her phone out, already crying a little, because she'd been crying a little at everything since the night in the truck. And on the other side, in a good wool coat, sitting very straight with her purse in her lap, Adele Merrick. Front row. Sloane ran the test herself, called them up one at a time. Patient, warm, exacting. She had become in 6 months the kind of teacher that the woman on the old banner would not have recognized and probably would not have liked, which was the highest compliment the universe could have paid her. She called Toby last. "Tobin Holloway, show me your form." And he did. Clean. The stances, the strikes, the blocks. 6 months of 3 afternoons a week built into a small body. No longer the kid who punched like he was apologizing. He was still 10. He was still small. But there was something in the way he moved now that hadn't been there before. A groundedness. A quiet. And Vaughn watched his son and felt his throat close. Because he could see it. His boy was learning to stop before he'd ever learned to lose control, which was backwards from how Vaughn had learned it. Backwards. And so much better. The thing Vaughn had bled for and welded a door for and almost lost himself for his son was getting it as a gift. At 10. Without the scars. Toby finished his last movement and held the final position. Breathing. Focused. And then he did the thing nobody had taught him. He turned. Before Sloane could say whether he'd passed. And he found his father's face in the front row, the way he always found it, the way they always found each other. And here is what happened inside Vaughn Holloway in that 1 second. Nothing you could see. He nodded. Not you passed that wasn't his to give. Something else. I see you. I see exactly who you're becoming. And your mother would not be able to breathe right now for how proud she'd be. I've got you covered, bud. I've always got you. That, Sloane said, and her voice cracked, despite everything, is a pass. That's a pass, Toby. You earned it. The gym erupted. The good kind. The kind that builds people up instead of tearing them down. Orange slices and sheet cake, and a grandmother in the third row on her feet, clapping like her hands might come off. And Toby ran. The same run as 6 months ago. Across the same floor. But everything about the world it ran into was different now. And Vaughn caught him. Of course he caught him. He'd always catch him. That was the entire job. The only job that ever mattered. Did I do it right, the stopping part? Toby's face was mashed into his shirt. Sloane says you can't test the stopping part. She says you can only test the punches. But did I? You did it right, Vaughn said into his son's hair. You've been doing it right your whole life. You did it right in a room full of 200 people when you called me back from the worst thing I ever almost did. You're better at the stopping part than I am, Bud. You always were. I'm just trying to catch up to you. And a few feet away, Adele Merrick was on her feet with everyone else. 68 years old, clapping for a child. And when Vaughn set the boy down and turned around, she was right there. And she put her hand on his arm. That was very good, she said. He worked hard. I meant you. And here's the thing. She still called him Vaughn, not son, not that day, not that year. 16 months of a cold parking lot, and a manila folder, and a woman who had decided at a wedding that she could not get to the bottom of a man's face that does not dissolve because you knelt on a mat one time. Some people heal all the way. Some people get about 70% of the way there and stop, and that's what they've got. And they hand it to you anyway. And Adele Merrick handed him 70% with both hands, and no excuses. Vaughn, she said, and he heard everything she meant underneath it. Yeah, he said, I know. That night after the cake was gone, and the folding chairs were stacked, and the last minivan pulled out of the lot, Vaughn came back one more time to lock up. It was his job. He still had the keys. Toby was asleep in the truck. Corinne was watching him. He turned off the lights. He locked the gym. And he walked out to the truck where his son was sleeping, and got in, and drove his boy home through the quiet dark. A maintenance worker. A father. The strongest man 11 million people had ever seen going back to a small life he'd chosen on purpose and would choose again 1,000 times. Because in the end, the whole world had it exactly backwards. They thought his silence was weakness. They thought his kindness was fear. They thought the strongest thing a man could do was prove what he was capable of. But Vaughn Holloway knew the truth. He'd spent his whole life paying for it, and he'd finally handed it down to his son. Clean. A man's worth is never measured by the power he shows. It is measured every single time by the power he chooses not to use.